All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. We got Arlen with us. It's a Monday with Arlen. You can see the thumbnail there. That's attributable to you, Arlen, the case against Trump. I think you make that case in your latest piece. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. What I'm saying is I just can't understand how anybody could vote for Trump or like Trump, but they do. So, and I guess my main point is he's getting worse. I think he's getting crazier. He's getting more, showing more signs of dementia. There's a lot of things wrong with him, and people are still flocking to him. The whole Republican Party has pretty much decided they're going to go with the MAGA people, and that's bad.
Well, we'll try to get you to understand why some people would vote for Trump under the current circumstances. I'll make that my goal, as it's been for umpteen weeks since you've been on this program, and so far, obviously, I've made no headway whatsoever.
No, you won't get me to say, Biden's a great president, but at the same time, you won't get me to even consider Trump.
No, but it's not even to consider. It's to try to consider why some people would vote for him, and it doesn't make them evil, ignorant, stupid. It just makes them human beings who have different, whose situation is very different from yours and who are looking at the world from a different perspective.
At the same time, there is a lot of ignorance and stupidity out there.
But that's true on both sides of the aisle. There's plenty of ignorant people on the Democratic side, too.
I'm sure there is, but I think the whole Republican Party right now is going crazy. I mean, did you hear what Rubio said, Senator Rubio in Florida? I mean, he was comparing the court case with communist China and Cuba. And I mean, these people
Well, you know what? I'm not going to argue with you, Arlen, because I've even said this, I think, maybe to you as bad. And I think I said this even last week. Both sides believe a lot of stuff that isn't true. But on balance, I think the Republican beliefs are a little crazier even. Like I said, the last week, the Russiagate story, even though debunked, even though not credible, has some evidence, fabricated, phony, put together by people with an interest, the Clinton campaign and the Democratic Party. But even so, there's something to it, not much. But there's nothing to the claim that Trump somehow really won the election. I mean, that's just complete BS. That's complete nonsense.
Yeah, and the fact that he decided he didn't lose, that he actually won, everybody just flocked to him and agreed with him for no reason, with no evidence.
Why don't they flock to him? I mean, his supporters still, are with him. I mean, that is true, but I don't know that it, I think the Democrats played it so badly in so many different ways. And I would say this. Let me posit this to you, Arlen. We'll get into a lot of stuff. We're going to center, as I always do, the Palestinian crisis. Really, the genocide is the right word. But let me posit this to you. Tell me if you think this sounds plausible. Many, many Americans, including many Democratic voters, don't really care that much about January 6th. They don't really care about whether Trump confuses who the president is. They're desperate. They're unhappy. They feel that nobody's on their side, and they want to change. Just as many voted for Barack Obama in 2008 because they really, really wanted a change. And that's how people feel today. And that's why many, not all, but some Trump voters are voting for Trump.
Well, people look at our country and realize that we're in bad shape. There's so many, bad things going on, so many issues that we're not solving. And, they're looking for something. And I guess somebody who can take over and, be sort of an authoritarian type and make, decide on his own rules appeals to a lot of people because, what we have now, the compromise is not there. And, our government is not functioning like it should.
Well, what if pretend that I'm going to sort of pretend that I'm a Trump-leaning voter. I'm a Trump-leaning voter who voted for Barack Obama in 2008, who voted for Barack Obama in 2012, who voted for Trump in 2016, and who voted for Biden in 2020. I want to set the stage, and now I'm leaning towards Trump. We'll probably vote for Trump in 2024. So I'm going to respond to you and say, my life isn't going very well. We voted for Barack Obama, my family. he said he was going to bring hope and change. And he brought more of these trade deals that made it harder and harder for me to make a living. Yes, there was the Affordable Care Act, but that Affordable Care Act actually led to my hours being cut back. So I would be under the amount of hours that would require my employer to provide care for me, to provide health care. So now I'm only working 20 hours at my primary job. I got to go work at the 7-Eleven. I work some weekends as well, driving an Uber, none of that. And I do all of that. And yes, I have a job. And yes, I make enough money, just barely. Rent is going up. Gasoline prices are going up. And even though I understand how bad the climate catastrophe is, I can't worry about that. I can only worry about my family. Trump says he's going to bring back jobs. He did sort of try to do that. Biden, things have not gotten better. So I'm going to be likely to vote for for Trump. And I really also resent the idea that I'm so stupid or a knuckle dragger or I'm racist or I'm ignorant or I'm brainless, which is the arguments I seem to hear from people who want me to vote for Biden.
Well, if you look at Trump's entire career, you realize he's corrupted. He's never told the truth in his life.
But could you just respond to what I just said rather than telling me how bad Trump is? All right. My specific points are, you're telling me how awful Trump is, how I'm stupid to vote for him. And I'm saying the reason I'm inclined to vote for him is because the Democrats have repeatedly disappointed me. And at least Trump has provided some solutions like the border crisis, right? I mean, they're human beings, those immigrants, and they deserve a decent life. And I agree Trump was too hard on them. But on the other hand, they're competing with me for very scarce jobs and driving my wages down. So, that's enough. At least he's got something in his quiver for me.
Well, there's no question about it. He offers change, and if people are upset, if they're not happy the way things are going, they're going to look for change. And he is the only change available. Besides Biden, he's the only other one that could be president. So yeah, I can understand that, but I think people aren't looking at the entire picture, and I think they should.
Well, I gotcha. All right, Arlen with me. It's Monday with Arlen. We're going to get into his piece in a second. I promised, though, as I always do, that I will center what's happening in Palestine. I think it's relevant to Arlen because, let me go to this slide first, because you mentioned Netanyahu. You see him as a potential thorn in Biden's re-election campaign. So we'll get to that. I wanted to just bring that up. But this is from the headlines in Al Jazeera. 40 more people killed by Israeli forces, 1 million forcefully displaced from Rafah. So it really couldn't be much worse, if worse at all. And then I want to play this video because I've heard from people who tell me that, Israel isn't genocidal. Israel, if they were, they wouldn't be considering the ceasefire that the United States has now proposed along with Qatar and Egypt, and that, by the way, Hamas has approved. And the answer is, well, look, non-starter. Netanyahu says we're not going to have that deal. It's not going to happen. So, we don't have time for the video. So let me ask you this. How does this play when it comes to the Biden campaign? How does this play for his reelection? And what, if anything, should he do about it?
Well, that's a question. I don't know if he could do much of anything because Netanyahu, as far as I'm concerned, is just like Trump. He's got his own issues. He's only thinking of himself. He wants to keep the war going and, nothing getting settled. So he doesn't go to jail. So he is not, losing an election. So, they're very similar in so many ways, I think. And I don't know that there's much that the United States could do about it when you have extremists on both sides. And I think Nicholas Kristof, the article you sent me, was very correct about, all of this. There's just so many variables, but both sides, have a lot to answer for. And they've, really done some horrible things and continue to do horrible things.
Well, you ask what Biden could do. Why not just cut off all aid? Why not just say that's it? You don't agree to the ceasefire deal. This is a great deal for Israel. You won't agree to it. That's it. We're not sending one more bomb, not one more missile, not one more bullet. And not only that, we're not even going to send you any of those Iron Dome, missiles that you use, or interception missiles that you use to stop the Hamas and Hezbollah and Iranian missiles. How about
Yeah,
just saying that?
you're right. I agree with you totally. Biden should be cutting off aid, should be cutting off weapons. And that's why there's many reasons I don't like Biden. But, my only concern right now is that Trump doesn't get elected. And, Biden has been a disappointment, no question about it. And he's not doing what he should be doing. And I wish he would.
Doesn't that concern that you've just expressed, the primacy of your fear of a Trump reelection, that it trumps, pardon the intended pun, any ultimate concerns about Biden? Doesn't that give Biden a pass, though? And aren't you concerned about that?
As I've said many times, it's the election system that we have. It's so stupid. We only have two choices, and they shouldn't be that way. Nobody really likes either one of these candidates, but they're the ones we have to choose from, and it's going to be decided. The vote's going to be decided in just a few swing states, and most of us, however we vote, it will not matter. It's crazy.
Well, all that is true. No question. Very accurate points. Arlen Grossman with us, author of America's Remarkable Election Denial. And folks, we're going to get into the weeds of Arlen's piece. It's at dailycoast.com. It's also on opednews.com. The link is in the show description, which is thebigpicturereport.com. That is the link I provided. I promise you we're going to get into it, but I still have a few more little just sort of background stuff that I wanted to talk about. And again, I feel like because there's a genocide going on, I have to center the Palestinians. But, I was really intrigued, Arlen, by the fact that, Mexico had an election. I don't know if you're following that, but they just elected a new president. They had two women candidates. Mexico just elected its first woman president. U.S. has still never had a woman president. I'm not a big believer in these kind of firsts. To me, it's like you elect the best person for the job. But it's still interesting to me that they managed to elect a woman before we did, even though this is a society that many of us perceive as, whether reality or not, as much more sexist than the United States. Also, the winner, Scheinbaum's actually Jewish, so they elected a Jewish president before we did, even though Jews make a very small percentage of their population. She beat Xochitl, that's pronounced, I thought it's like Xochitl, but it's Xochitl Galvez, who was a self-made woman, started a tech company. She was born into great poverty. She reminded me a little bit of Oprah in certain ways. So this is a long story. Why do they have better candidates in Mexico than we do? Isn't this part of the problem? Scheinbaum is a climate scientist. She was elected at Berkeley. Galvez, again, makes herself up from the very bottom, totally unlike Trump, who was born halfway to home and didn't get any farther. If we had candidates like this, I don't think you'd have to be worrying about a Trump or Biden presidency, Arlen. I'm sorry I had trouble with your name.
Yeah, well, I forget your name sometimes too, but it makes no sense. You're right. Mexico is usually, Mexico's had a lot of problems and they're not doing all that great, but they're smart enough to at least elect a woman candidate. They're making a change. They have a little bit more flexibility than we do. Again, our system is so messed up. We have just two parties who control everything, and so our choices are so limited. It's
Can you explain what you just said, Arlen? Because I don't really understand it, and I'm sure you're right. But you said they have a little more flexibility in their system. Were you thinking of something in particular? Because maybe just that more possible candidates can run. I'm just curious because it does seem like we just have this billionaire, former billionaire Trump, who made a name for himself, as a game show host, and a guy Biden who's been a government functionary for 50 years. How come they're able? Maybe that's the way to phrase it, to choose people who seem to come out, outside of that elite, tiny little elite minority.
Well, I won't pretend to understand the Mexican system, but I could, how could it be any worse than our system? I mean, they probably at least have a system where the person that gets the most votes will be president. I mean, we don't even have that.
Well, it's coalition. I think they actually voted by party. So okay. Xochitl Galvez was the opposition, more conservative branch of the government, and she put together a center-right coalition, but they were unable to gather more than about 30% of the vote. So Scheinbaum's coalition with close to 60%, the center-left to left coalition, leftist coalition.
It's complicated, but it would be nice if we could try all these different things. And unfortunately, right now things are so baked in that we really can't. We need some major changes to be done, and Trump won't do it, and Biden won't do it. So I'm hoping that somewhere in the future somebody will step forward and help us make those changes.
This is from your piece right there. People can see it on the screen. Tell us, I highlighted a couple of points, but basically, are you saying, well, tell me what you're saying in this when you say that, people are unprepared. I mean, you just think, well, you tell us, Arlen.
Well, first of all, those aren't my words. Those are Eric Fromm. That's just a quote from Eric Fromm. So,
but you quoted him, right? But you quoted him because obviously you think it's pertinent to today's events.
It very much is. So, yeah, I mean, you look back at fascist powers in the past, Mussolini and Hitler and all that, and I hate to say it, but I think there's a lot of similarities in what we have with Trump. People just accept a person like Trump without even really thinking very deeply about it, not looking at the entire picture. So I like what he said.
Well, I think that's fair, Arlen. I mean, I do think that people vote basically based on personal, they have personal motives, personal reasons. And so that's why I guess I feel like your piece, if you want to convince people not to vote for Trump, I think you have to make the argument that he's going to make your life worse. Well, and I think that's where I don't see it in your piece. And maybe, and I'm not saying that he won't, maybe he will. I don't think he was a good president. I don't think he's making things better. But and when I say you, I mean the Democratic Party. I mean the people who want Joe Biden to get reelected. I think that you have to make the case, Joe Biden, if he's reelected, will make your life better. And I'm not hearing that argument.
Well, I'll tell you, the quote I really like is from the award-winning historian Douglas Brinkley, well-respected. He warns that a second Trump term could lead to the end of our democracy and the birth of a new kind of authoritarian presidential order. I don't want that, but he makes a lot of sense, and that's the way things seem to be going.
But and Arlen, you'll be impressed. I had that quote as well, although I didn't get it up quickly as I would have hoped when you started bringing it. I tried to get as much of your piece. Some of it I didn't put together in my slide deck, but much of us, I think, is this what you're, this is the exact quote you just gave us. But if for people who say, you know what, democracy sounds great, but I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I'm living hand to mouth. I can't even expect my kids are going to have a better life than I have. What do I care about democracy?
Yeah, I understand that completely. But look, what's an option other than democracy? It's dictatorship. It's authoritarianism. It's somebody telling, being in control of everything, which Trump would be if he were elected. So,
but then if you want democracy, don't you have a moral obligation? Not just if you want what you want for yourself, which is freedom, freedom of speech, you can say whatever you like without possibly going to jail. You get to choose your representatives. There's not some tyrant who installs themselves as dictator. If that's what you want, then don't you need to be fighting every single day to make sure that every single American has health care, every single American has a decent job, place to work? Because that's why they're turning to Trump, in my opinion. They are feeling desperate. They don't have other options.
Yeah, but Trump doesn't offer those things, as you know. Trump doesn't care about health care. He doesn't care about any of those things. He's only, thinks about himself. He doesn't really care about the rest of the country.
I understand, and that's an argument for you not to vote for Trump. But how is that an argument for an underemployed Midwest factory worker whose grandfather owned their own house and was able to raise 4 kids, including send one to college, and now is barely able to stay in a third floor walk-up rental and living a really crappy life?
Yeah, I feel bad for that kind of person. There's a lot of those kind of people around, but they only have two choices. They have Biden, where you have at least a somewhat of a democracy, a very imperfect one, or you have Trump, who will be a dictator and pretty much take over the country and may not even allow another election, as a few people have talked about, like Paul Krugman. So, we only have two choices, Hal. And
So
so,
you're saying here, or maybe it's Brinkley, I'm not clear, but I think the phrase another presidency would cause, Trump presidency would cause chaos in the country and the world. That's your words, right, Arlen?
wait, where's that?
Can you look at this? It's on the screen, actually. You should be able to see it. I've got the quote right on
Oh,
the screen for you.
yeah, that's the way I feel. I think our country would really fall apart.
But don't we already have that? I mean, aren't we already in chaos? The war in Ukraine is heating up. We may be authorized. Germany's already authorized Zelensky to start firing missiles, at least over the line. Now, I was reading about this. I think it was overstated a little bit, this idea that suddenly the Ukraine is going to be targeting the Russian interior. No, they're going to be like shooting at the mortar launchers and stuff right on the line. It's not quite a full-scale war, but even so, things in Ukraine aren't good. It's clearly chaotic there. It's clearly getting worse. The situation in the Middle East is awful. There's a lot of chaos in this country, and I think these claims about the border too are vastly overblown by people with political reasons to try to make things seem worse than they are. But there, the feeling is that the borders aren't secure. So aren't we already, isn't the world you fear that would come if Trump's elected a world many of us already inhabit?
Yeah, there's terrible things going on and problems, issues everywhere, but it would get a lot worse if Trump were elected. That's all I'm saying.
I was interested in this because, and I hear you. I guess I'm not fully sold. I feel like things are so bad, period, that I mean, maybe they would get worse, but again, they're really bad now. I feel like we have to go in a different direction. And in terms of, again, chaos. So this is from today's New York Times. I was so struck by these two competing headlines, both right at the same time, one right under the other. So here's the one with Biden, and then let me see if I can get the Trump one on your screen. So Trump's harder line on immigration appears to resonate, polls show, and this is under the one where Biden's going to crack down on the border and take away some rights to asylum that are currently in place for immigrants. So they both seem to have the exact same response.
Well, it's a problem all over the world. Immigration, people, migrating to different countries, and a lot of, countries are not feeling very good about it. And that's why we have more problems with authoritarian leaders now, and more than ever before. But you also have to consider that Trump has no answers. He would be worse on Israel. He would let them do whatever they want. And, on all these issues, he has no answers. He just, wants to just say that he has all the answers, when it's not true.
Let me say, Arlen, look, I don't want to be too tough on you and may be a real pain. I get your points. I do. I really do. I don't think they're unreasonable. I don't think they're irrational. I think they're persuasive. They don't quite persuade me, but I get them. I really do. So I don't want to be too difficult. I think maybe where we kind of miss each other a little bit is maybe you're a little more sanguine than I am about the future, maybe. And let me just put these right together, because I really, again, because I just don't see that. I guess maybe, and you are very willing to criticize Biden, which I greatly appreciate, and all that. And I think your challenges to Trump are spot on. I guess where maybe we don't connect is just that I think there's more similarities. I don't think they're that different. I don't think there's such a qualitative difference. And I think when you suspend long time protections for people and you support genocide, then I have to question, if you're the representative of democracy, what kind of democracy do we have?
We have a very imperfect democracy, a lot of problems with it. I do understand where you're coming from, Hal, and I agree with it in many ways. I'm just telling you we have two choices, and I certainly know better of the two. So, there's no doubt about it. For me,
Arlen with us. There's so much here. I've really billboarded a lot. I really don't want to take more of your time. Do you want to give us, you think, and maybe this is the best way. So do you think, and I talked about this Friday quite a bit, do you think, as I do, that guilty verdict in New York will significantly hurt Trump's chances for re-election?
I don't know about significantly. I'm hoping if it just peels away a few votes, a couple percent here and there, that may make the difference, and I'd be happy about that. So,
I think Americans don't want to elect felons. I think Americans, do you think he should go to jail? Do you think what he did rises to the level of a jailable offense or incarcerable offense?
Well, I think that judge has a really tough, very tough thing to figure out because, what is appropriate for a former president? Can you put Trump in jail? That seems unlikely, but probation is not going to be very, much of a penalty considering what he's done. So I feel sorry for the judge. He's going to make some people very happy and some people very unhappy. And there's no easy answer to this, probably.
I think that's fair. I, on balance, probably would lean against incarceration for a variety of reasons. It's not a violent offense. It wasn't really, I don't, I'd have to look at Stormy Daniels' testimony very closely. I'd like to know what kind of pressure he really brought to bear on her. She said she was afraid of him. Is that really accurate? Trump's, you claim, you analogize Trump to Mussolini and Hitler. They were both very violent men. And Hitler, before he took power, I don't know about Mussolini nearly as well, but I've read a lot of books on Hitler. Hitler was murdering people, before he became chancellor, before he took power. When he was just the leader of a ragtag band of disgruntled former German soldiers, they were killing people. They were taking them into the forests of Bavaria and shooting them and putting bullets in their head if they were political opponents. I'm not aware of Trump there are some allegations he worked with the mob and that kind of thing, and maybe it's true. I like to see that. I don't see that record quite the same. But, white-collar crime is serious. He was hiding expenditures. And election fraud is really serious. I mean, he did it to become the president. So, I wouldn't say as the crime itself is one that shouldn't be punished by incarceration, but I would argue this. It looks bad if you do it. It looks like it's politically motivated. It looks partisan, and that's a problem.
Well, you have to consider that Trump's behavior during that trial was so awful. He was, so many times penalized, and he's insulted everybody, including the judge's family. So I think, it wouldn't bother me if Trump got like 2 days in jail, 3 days in jail. I think that would be really appropriate.
I think that's a great point. I think that makes sense. He was so awful. It was so immature. I mean, putting aside all the sinister stuff you talk about, I mean, he's a baby. He's a narcissist. I think it's pathetic. I think he's a pathetic character. I really do.
And he's getting worse. That's one of the points I was trying to get across in my article. I quoted a couple of well-known professional psychiatrists and all that who really can see that he's leaning toward dementia now. You can see he's getting crazier. The pressure is getting to him. He's saying crazier things than he's ever said. He's more extreme than he ever was. And I think by the time November comes around, I think people are going to see that he's really kind of crazy.
Yeah, I'll put this quote up. I didn't put the psychologist's quotes because I figured you can bring those out. But let me put this up, which alludes to them. I think there's a danger when you focus too much on his dementia and his apparent dementia, because obviously Biden ain't exactly got he's lost a lot on his fastball too. So
Agreed.
I think it's better to focus on policy whenever possible. But the behaviors we saw in that courtroom were really, I think they were troubling. They were worrisome for sure. That's what I would focus on if I were Biden. If I were doing ads, I would have try to present him as this, really, irrational person who's clearly in violation of, who acts so immaturely and in violation of court order. I think that would also turn people off. You talk about, so we mentioned mentally and psychologically unstable and likely in the early stages of dementia. That may be true, right? Because he does have trouble, or maybe it's Alzheimer's. He can't remember who's president. He doesn't know who the presidents are of different countries. Of course, Biden's made more than his share of those kind of gaffes as well. So I think they both, their issues. What are the authoritarian, you mentioned this, I wanted you to be specific here. His authoritarian / fascist plans. So what are those exactly, Arlen?
Well, I think it would be where he would be the one in charge of everything. He would decide, who gets jailed, he would take over the Justice Department and put in, one of his buddies, and they could do whatever Trump wanted to do. And he could, push aside some laws that Congress might, pass. And, he could do pretty much whatever he wants. If at least he would like to do that. I think if he were president, he would love the chance to be a, dictator and totally control everything. I mean, that's just who he is.
So you're talking about the theory of the unitary president, right?
Yeah.
Of course, that was developed in part by Justice Alito to bolster George W. Bush's powers, and by extension, Dick Cheney's.
Well, you bring up the name Alito, and you got to think the Supreme Court, which is in the worst shape it's ever been in. I mean, Alito is really off the rails, and Thomas, and we have to do something about the Supreme Court, but there's nothing in place that gives us the power to change the Supreme Court. It's awful.
Well, Congress could increase the size. They could denominate a 13 justice court and then have the president appoint 4 more. And the Senate is in Democratic hands, so that could be done. Of course, the House would never go along with that. It's something that could have been done in the first 2 years of Biden's presidency. They didn't do it.
You don't think Biden has that power too, to change the number?
No, the Congress has that power.
Okay.
And so it could have been done in his first 2 years in office when he had the House and the Senate. Because if you recall, the Senate was in Democratic hands in Biden's first 2 years.
Okay. But the Supreme Court, the problem with changing the numbers of the Supreme Court is you do that, and then the next president comes in and he changes it, or his Congress changes it, and it goes back and forth changing it. It's endless, and it's going to be a major problem.
Yeah, I get that. On the other hand, the way you avoid that problem, hopefully, is you govern really, really well, and you make things better for people, and you stop being corrupt, and you stop stymieing bills because the fossil fuel industry or the war weapons manufacturers don't like them, or the for-profit healthcare corporations don't like them, and you pass legislation that really does make life a lot better for Americans. And then they'll vote for you, like they did for the Democrats for the 30 years after FDR left office, or the 20 years after he left office, rather.
It was a different kind of Democratic Party back then. It was a Democratic Party that, was really pro-worker, pro-union. And now, it's gotten to the point where, money is everything. Donors are everything. And the Democrats are, suckered into it, and the Republicans certainly. So it's a different Democratic Party. I'm disappointed in it. You're disappointed in it. And I hope we can figure out a way to change it.
All right, you're watching Halitics. It's an Arlen Monday. Arlen talking about his piece. I do really urge you to read it. America's Remarkable Election Denial. We've got a little bit of time. We move very, very quickly. Arlen, I can move to a Christoph story, but I don't want to move on. And it's connected. It's not like this is less marriage, less sex, less agreement. This is not the one that I had. I gave you two. The other one was about the situation in Gaza, which I did not agree with a lot of what Christoph says. I often disagree with him. I didn't agree with his kind of equal treatment. I think it was a false equivalency. I don't think the Palestinians, the Gazans, are victims, and I do think they're victims, and I don't think the Israelis are victims, although they like to see themselves that way. So I thought he wrongly equated their situations, but you probably felt that way too, but just not as you felt. It was somewhat relevant. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know if
he made good points. I mean, both sides are doing atrocities. Both sides are dehumanizing the other side, and you just can't do that. That's just not a way to, I
just don't think that's what the Palestinians are doing. I don't see how they're the oppressed. They're the victims. They're the persecuted. This is the point that Christoph misses, in my opinion, is that Israel is rich and powerful with a first world army. Palestinians are weak, divided, poor, with again, not much of a military at all. They can commit some crimes, but that's it. So I don't see them. How are they dehumanizing Israel? I don't see that either.
Well, I think I'm talking about Hamas, basically. They're the ones that are leaders of, the Palestine in Gaza. And, they think that, Israel is evil and it should be destroyed. And,
Can you blame them? Can you blame them for
thinking that? It's not a way to, have peace and, accomplish anything. So, and the same way, Israelis think of the Palestinians as less than human, and they don't mind, killing lots of civilians, and it's horrible. It is.
Well, but that's exactly why Hamas is so angry at Israel. That's why Hamas commits the reprisals against Israel, because they're representing the victims. Now, of course, that doesn't mean there aren't going to be some innocents in Israel who are killed, but I think you have to. If you want to solve the problem, a pox on both their houses isn't the answer. The answer is what is to envision a just solution, and what would that look like? And he doesn't do that. Christoph doesn't do that.
Well, because there's no easy answers, Hal. But there's nothing good about Hamas. They're horrible. They're extremist, and they're deadly. And unfortunately, they're in charge of Gaza right now. And I think what has to happen is there has to be a two-state solution. I think the international community has to help step in and guarantee, the safety of all sides. And I hope that happens.
All right, let's get to the second piece. Unless you have anything else you want to throw in, something we missed, some sort of imprecation to people. I don't know if that's the right. What does imprecation mean? I'm not looking. That is a word. To vote for Joe Biden, which you're not even going to do in California, I think.
It doesn't.
Imprecation is a spoken curse. So I guess I was looking for an imploration, but that's not a word. Anyway, imploration. Earnest supplication. Yes, any implorations, Arlen?
I don't have any implorations because I don't know what they are.
Like you're going to beg people to do something.
Just don't vote for Trump. That's all I can say.
Okay. Exhortations. There's a good thesaurus.
That word I know.
Synonym. Exhortation. Exhort people. All right, let's get to, because we got some time. We want to use it up. We don't want to just dump the program. I have focused on this quite a bit, and I was interested that this came out of Christoph's word processor. Maybe he writes with aren't there some authors? Are you one of those? Do you still have a quill? Do you use a quill pen? Because I know you write.
Well, of course I use my typewriter. I know other people use computers, but I like my typewriter.
Do you have an old Olympus or something? Do you use the whiteout? How do you correct your errors? Exactly.
Yeah, I use the whiteout. It works. It takes a little extra time, but It's worked for famous people in the past and successful people in the past, so I'm going to go with it.
You don't use the quill pen anymore though. Do you have a blotter? You know how you have the ink is still wet, so you have to blot it with like this sort of spongy thing that you push down on the paper.
That's why I stopped using that. It just got too messy.
Gotcha. Right.
The typewriter is not messy like that.
I you know what? I'm just thankful that I've got somebody out there that's older than I am that I can tease about age. But for how much longer, Arlen? I think as you've learned, the people that are older than we are start to die, and then there's not that many people who are older than we are, and then there aren't anybody. Actually, my mother-in-law's home, there's some centenarians. She's got 103. Can you believe that?
Wow,
pretty old.
Amazing. Yeah. By the way, Clint Eastwood just turned 94. In case you're interested.
How's he doing? Do you ever see him walking around Carmel or wherever he is?
I do not. He doesn't hang around Delray Oaks or the places that I go to, but he's around somewhere.
Says he remarried. I know he was married to Dina when I was there, but Dina Ruiz Eastwood, but they got divorced. She was like his third wife, but he had children with other women as well. By the way, speaking of old people who got remarried, the Fox guy, Rupert Murdoch, just had his, I think, fourth wife now. Fourth or fifth wife.
Much better than he is.
He's 93.
Yeah.
All right. Less marriage, not for billionaires, obviously, not for Clint Eastwood, or I don't know if he's a billionaire. I think he might be, but maybe not quite. But for most of us, less marriage, less sex, especially if you're younger, less agreement. I think this is a real problem. All kidding aside, people make jokes about sex and all that. I think it's really, really sad. Young people should be out having fun, enjoying each other physically, as long as this is what I always said to my sons. It has to always be completely consensual. It has to be whatever you do has to be what you want and the person you're with wants. And be careful, be safe, make sure you don't get any diseases and you don't have any babies. And otherwise, as long as there's mutual respect, but people, I think, should want to have fun and enjoy themselves, and they're not. And this is both genders, both sexes. It's very sad.
It's a very complicated world we're in right now because I think the influence of social media and phones and everything has just changed the way young people, act and feel. And, it's causing problems that we never had before. And, this is just one example. Men and women see things so differently, and it's hard for them to marry. And men feel that they're not respected because they, in the past, they were big and strong and that mattered. That stuff doesn't matter anymore, not as much as it used to. So,
but let me say, Arlen, a point about that. Yes, there are some different worldviews expressed by men and women, but some are the same. Both are unhappy. Both feel the world isn't going in a good place. Both feel things should change.
Yeah, there's no question about that, and that's why that's why I think the young men are mostly going toward Trump because they feel they're not respected, and the women are going more toward Biden because he at least listens to them and tries to help them. So we got some differences, and the society is paying a price, I guess.
Well, what should those in power, or let me put it a different way, what would you like to see those in power do to address this problem?
I don't have any quick, easy answers, but there's a lot of people who are thinking about these things and do have some ideas. And, I think we need to do something because the way things are going, it's just not good. Not good for the country, not good for those involved, and a lot of unhappy people out there.
So, Arlen, I am a little surprised by your answer because even though I know you don't watch a lot of my live streams, we do debate this together. We do debate periodically. I mean, don't you think what I always propose, and I'm not trying to be facetious, I'm really curious. My solutions are very simple and they're always the same. Guarantee everyone enough. Nobody has too much. Everyone has health care. We make sure we have interesting jobs that do allow for some advancement. Lots, we don't offshore jobs. We bring them, we reshore jobs. We make, people graduate from college with enormous debts. That's part of the reason for the unhappiness. So wouldn't just some kind of economic fairness, economic justice that's closer to what America looked like in the late 30s, 40s more than 30s, 50s, 60s, wouldn't that go a long way towards reducing some of these tensions?
I'm totally in agreement with you, Hal. I don't disagree with anything you say there. And the question is, how do we get there?
Well, that's why I was surprised, because it seems to me it's not such a complicated issue. This is what people say, things are complicated. It is not complicated. We just make sure that you have virtually confiscatory tax on anyone who has over $100 million. When they die, all of it goes to the state. When you're making over $10 million, 95, 99% of that is taxed away from you. There's all manner of having a fair, juster tax system that makes sure that no one has too much. And at the same time, we have enough to provide a decent life. People have culture, so there's entertainment, leisure time. And we were closer to that. Things weren't perfect when the Democrats were in power in the late 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever. They certainly weren't perfect, but they were a lot better. We got civil rights as a result. So how do we get there? That's a tough one. I don't know how you get. That's why I do this program. That's why I wanted people to vote for Bernie. I thought he would be a step in the right direction. But I'll be honest with you, the solutions may be obvious, but how to get them seems anything but.
Since we agree, maybe you and I should think about running for president on some kind of a ticket, and see if we can get there with a third party. Because
Dude, this isn't Mexico. This isn't Mexico, where you can have people from out of, that's why I brought up the two women who are kind of outside the process for a while who managed to run. That doesn't work. You have to be vetted. You have to be acceptable to the political establishment. Trump, to some degree, isn't. And I think that's a lot of his appeal for many people.
Well, he makes the billionaires happy, and they're giving him lots of money because he treats them very fairly when it comes to, not really unfairly, when it comes to taxes. He lets them off the hook, and that's why he's raising a lot of money. I don't know if he's truly getting it from the people, but he's making a lot of money from these super rich corporations and billionaires, I think.
All right, Halitics with Arlen and Hal. We got about 10, 15 more minutes. I haven't really asked for this, but I will now. Give us a call, 240-242-5646. I always can't remember my numbers. I have to look. I've got so many of them. Actually, Luke Jones, who was on, was it Friday? When was Luke on? Thursday. Luke was on, and he was all confused about my phone number. So join the club, Luke. I'm confused about my phone numbers. 240-242-5646. Great talking to you as well. I don't. It's times are rough. Times are depressing. Nothing looks really good. Let me play this guy since we've got a little time. Yes, there's a lot of struggles. People really take. So here's John Legend. I don't know if you saw this video. He is explaining on Pod Save America. He is a music guy. I don't know. He's a producer. I guess he sings. Are you familiar with his body of work at all? John Legend.
Yeah, he's well known. He's done a lot of good. He's a good musician, and he does great songs, and he does a lot. Yeah, I mean he's very well known.
He's very progressive. I know his wife is a model. Chrissy Teigen, I believe, is her name. I could be wrong about that. I get a lot of things wrong, but I might be right about that. He's very progressive, or very liberal anyway. He worked for Obama. So here he is on Pod Save America. That's really, and Arlen and I realize where I want to go, but with you that we hadn't yet explored is the media's responsibility. You blame a lot of the problems we have right now, as I see it, or that Trump could win, on a complacent establishment, right? Complacent institutions, media, leadership that doesn't quite understand the depth of the problem that we face with Trump. Is that fair? And that comes from your piece too.
Yeah, that is fair. The other problem, I think, is the right-wing media, which is just making lots of money trying to stir people up and tell them lies. And, the Fox News and their copycats, they're all over the place. And if people who stick within that bubble, if that's what they do, then they only see, hear what Trump wants them to hear. So, yeah, think the media situation is really bad, not at all like it was, 30, 40 years ago.
But again, I'm going to push back on that, Arlen, and I respect you. I respect what you're saying, and you say it very, very well. And it's, by the way, thebigpicturereport.com, Americans Election Denial. You can click on the link in the description. But this is media. This Pod Save America. This is new media. This is a lot of subscriptions, almost more than 500,000, I believe. Maybe it's many more than that. I'm surprised it isn't more. And they're talking about the exact issue you are. They're just as concerned as you are about the dangers of Trump. The New York Times is constantly focusing on how bad Trump is and how much we have to worry about him. CNN, MSNBC. I mean, don't you think all these are media elites that's basically see it the way you do? I think that now they see the way you do. That's where you get a lot of your information yourself.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't see those sources, though, is what I'm trying to say. They stick with, Fox News, Newsmax, Breitbart, all that kind of stuff, and they're in a bubble and they don't hear what other people are saying or what more established media are saying. So, that's a problem right there.
Yeah, but Arlen, we all seek out media that kind of reinforces our view. It's not just the right, it's everybody. I mean, you do also, right? I mean, you look for people that you agree with and that say what you believe and that reinforce your views.
Yeah, and I think the difference is, years ago you didn't have, one side and the other side. It was kind of in the middle, and you have the Walter Cronkites, Huntley and Brinkley, and you don't have that anymore. Now it's all, one side or the other, and you pick your side.
All right, here's Pod Save America. By the way, Arlen Grossman, pundit, thought leader. I didn't have your title up there like I should have.
I see
Maybe
it.
I did. There it is now.
Results over the last several years as well, that Biden is particularly struggling with some young voters, black voters, Latino voters, particularly young black males and young Latino males. So there's sort of there's a gender discrepancy here. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think Trump performs a form of masculinity that I think is attractive to some people. And to be clear, like...
I'm going to stop it there. I'll play a little more. But I didn't really understand. Again, I'm not trying to be stupid or disingenuous. What do you think he means? Because I don't, Arlen. I'm not asking. I'm not putting you on this. I'm not. This isn't a test. What do you think he means when he says he performs a certain kind of masculinity? And that may go to the article we talked about with Christoph.
Well, I can understand that. I mean, that's what a fascist authoritarian is like. Somebody that's really strong and powerful, could do whatever he wants. And, that is attractive to a lot of people, especially young men, who feel that they're being oppressed and their lot in life has gotten worse. So, yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, is that performing masculine? I don't know. He seems to me sort of weak and again, pathetic. So I don't really see that at all. Like, compare him to say, and this guy didn't do anything for me, but if you said that about Schwarzenegger, right, I would sort of more get it, right? If you said, well, Governor Schwarzenegger, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he performs is maybe I have trouble with the word performs because I don't quite know what he means by performs, but maybe if Legend or someone else had said, well, Governor Schwarzenegger represents, he's emblematic of a certain kind of masculinity that's very appealing to people, I would understand that. I don't really see it with Trump, but you do, so I guess he's making sense.
I think it's his self-confidence. He just comes across so strong, and he knows what he wants, and he's going to do what he wants, and doesn't care what anybody else thinks. And I guess that appeals to people, certain people, not to me. Yeah,
I don't even. I don't know. I don't.
By the way,
as you said, he comes across often as demented. He's clumsy in his phrasing. I don't see that in him. I guess maybe that's part of the problem. I don't think that's. I don't agree with this explanation, perhaps. But let me play some more.
Black men, even an uptick for Trump is still a landslide for Biden.
For sure.
So black men are overwhelmingly, more than any other race of men, are supporting Joe Biden.
Very true.
But, there is an uptick, and that uptick may be enough to win Wisconsin, or it may be enough to win Michigan, or wherever. And so, it's an issue that the campaign's going to have to deal with. And so, but I do think Trump performs a form of masculinity that is appealing to some men, black, white, Hispanic, across the board. And that may explain the uptick. And then, I hear a lot of misinformation and disinformation about the economy under Trump and what's happened since. And to be clear, like, the economy is doing quite well. We came back from a pandemic. The unemployment rate is extremely low. It's like crazily low. It's low among black people. It's low among Hispanics. It's low among the entire nation.
I want to stop it there for a second because, see, I think this is, again, where a lot of liberals really just miss the boat entirely. So for John Legend and Chrissy Teigen, obviously the economy's great. I mean, right? I mean, they're super rich. Maybe he is a billionaire. I don't know. Super wealthy people. Beautiful people. Look, he's really good looking. He's young. His wife's a supermodel. They're obviously, for them, life is great. He's not really connected anymore, as far as I know, to the struggles that so many people, black, white, Latino, are facing. And I bring up Sabby Sabs, who does another podcast, Arlen Livestream, like me, and she spends a lot of time talking to poor and working class black people, middle class black people, and she tells such a different story. She doesn't talk about how they don't tell her, oh, things are good, I've got jobs. They say, it keeps getting harder and harder for me to stay in this neighborhood. The rents keep going up. I have to work more hours. It's tougher for me. There's more people moving in who want, she describes tensions between different ethnic communities. More Asian people are moving into our neighborhoods now, driving the rents up. So and then they'll say, when Trump was president, we always heard how bad Trump was, but really it wasn't so bad. So Legend seems to be doing what a lot of liberals do, is they're telling people, oh, things really aren't as bad as you think. Things are better than you think. Trump is so awful. And it doesn't really jibe with their lived experiences.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The economy is bad. A lot of people are really suffering. And since Joe Biden right now is the president, he's considered the one responsible. So, a lot of people, prefer somebody different than Biden. And unfortunately, the only other choice we have is Trump. So, yeah.
Trump, let me ask you this. We're almost done, Arlen, I promise. It's been a really interesting discussion, and I'm really enjoying it. I feel like I'm learning a lot. I hope you're finding it edifying. What if I say to you, as going back into my persona as a Trump voter, okay, Arlen, you've made a strong case for voting for Biden in this election cycle. I live in Michigan, so obviously my vote is going to matter. But I want to know in the next election cycle that the Democrats are going to be fighting for working class people, are going to be saying, I want to bring good jobs back to this country. I want to make sure that Americans can organize. I want to eliminate that unfair debt that your kids, education debts that your kids have. How can you assure me? What guarantees can you offer me that there will be a new and improved Democratic Party that really is going to champion working people? And not only that, we'll say F you to its funders, its financiers.
Yeah, obviously we can't guarantee anything. And, and I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I think the Democratic Party has to really look at why are they so close to somebody like Trump as far as, the polls and everything? It shouldn't even be close. So the question is why? What can the Democrats do to make, their party different and start working for the, like you say, the working class, unions, and, people who need health care and everything else? There is no guarantee. So we just got to hope and we got to push the Democratic Party in that direction, get involved in the Democratic Party, push it into a more progressive state and make some major changes, because if we don't, we're going to repeat this stuff over and over and over.
All right, so I want to just end, Arlen. I always, try to give you the last word. So I'm going to put this quote up, which I may have presented earlier, but I kind of feel like, because you do call your column the America's Remarkable Election Denial. So I guess that's why you wrote it, right? You want us to stop being in denial.
Yeah.
I do think I think you kind of clarified this to my satisfaction. There are institutions, right? There is media that takes Trump very seriously. I don't know how the New York Times could be more serious, or CNN, frankly, or MSNBC could be more serious in their opposition to Trump. But I think your challenge is getting the people who don't read, who don't listen to those outlets to see things the way they and you do. And I think that's going to be an impossible order because their experiences are so different.
Yeah, you got it's like two different worlds, two different realities out there, and we can't exist as a country like that. We got to figure out a way to get together to do, compromise, get some things done. And if one side only says one thing and shows everything in one way, and it goes, you're right, it goes both on the left and both on the right, and on the right. So there are things that we have to do, and I don't have a perfect answer, but there has to be changes for sure.
All right, Arlen, you get the last word. I just want to remark, though, this is not, when I say the last word, the last kind of opinion, comment. We do have some nice comments in the chat. They just popped up. I don't know if they've been there for a while. They just popped up on my feed. So sorry we can't get to you, Triple G and PT, but I'll try to respond to them tomorrow. And Arlen, as always, great to chat. Excuse me, got a cough there. Great to chat with you. Have a great afternoon, and I'll be back tomorrow.
Okay, great, Al. I'll see you next Monday.